Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very proud to introduce PeggyLi.
Cool. I actually did not know the number of packages in the standard library, but somehow I'm still up here, so thank you. Like Steve and Mark both kindly said, my name is Peggy. I'm talking today about to go or not to go. And this is kind of going to take a look at situations where maybe we don't want to use Go for something, and I'll go into a little bit more about what exactly I mean by that in a couple of slides. To introduce myself briefly, I'm currently a software engineer at a startup called Clever in San Francisco, and we are in the United States, maybe a global someday education space. I've been writing Go for about 2 years now, and over the past year plus, I've been using Go at work, so shipping to production in Go. Also using a little bit of Node in my current role as well. Previous to this, though, my background is mostly in Python, so in school and in my previous jobs, I worked on internal tooling at LinkedIn, and that was a purely Python job. So that's a little bit of my background. And as a quick disclaimer, I love Go. I'm sure most of us, if not all of us here do, that's why we're here today. And I think it'll become clear pretty shortly why I'm putting this up here. And when you really love something like writing Go, for example, you really want to share that passion and that excitement with everyone else. You think, you have your reasons for really liking Go. You find it easy to be productive in Go. You have all these benefits that you derive from using Go, and you want to help enable other people at work, your friends, just other people in the community. And I think it's really natural and really great of us to want to share that passion and that desire to help others. But that said, about 6 months ago, I was chatting with a friend who had just moved to San Francisco and was the first engineer at a small company at a startup. And they were building out a pretty standard kind of web consumer-facing product. And this was a friend whose background was primarily in Scala, so definitely not in Go. He was looking to using Docker and Kubernetes for deployments. But it was with a Scala code base, and naturally, as someone who really loves Go, and as someone who wants to see the Go community really grow and thrive, my first reaction was, "Oh, Scala, you should totally use Go instead because reasons X, Y, Z that I'm sure we all know about, but I'll get into a little bit more anyway." And we kind of talked briefly on this, and he was talking about his build system and this continuous integration setup and things like that. And there were all these terms being thrown around that I sort of knew about from having worked with Java in school, but hadn't really touched upon. If you came up to me and told me you should use Scala or you should use Java, I would just be like, why? So even though Go is really great, I think I definitely have the advantage. I think many of us here might of having delved into it for the first time, maybe personally, maybe you had a side project or a hackathon project, or your company or manager was really open to the idea of you exploring a different tool for a project or something that you're building at work. And it becomes a natural segue. But when you're the first person at a startup and you're really need to ship a MVP to get feedback, to get your first customers, and your background isn't in Go, and there's no one there to help you, it's a little bit harder to sell. Because you're not just selling them on the merits of the language itself, but on the reasons why you need to make that jump and kind of be willing to buy into this whole learning curve and this whole ramp up and learn not just how you write the code, the syntax, but also how do you build it, how do you deploy it, what are the best practices for performance optimizations and all of these other considerations. So even though like I said, I really love Go, I'm not trying to hate on Go or anything. I think in recent meetups I've attended, recent conference talks I've heard, blog posts, and other content I've read from the Go community, I think, honestly, it has become a little bit of an echo chamber. I think this is true for a lot of communities. I don't think it's reflective of just Go itself. But what happens is we kind of hear the same motivations for using Go a lot. And I think those are really great because they really represent the design choices and the motivations behind the language in the first place. For example, we hear about the simplicity, we hear about how it's more performant than, for example, C or C++, but certainly a lot more readable and maintainable and just more pleasant and fun overall to work with. We hear about tools like GothamGo, which make writing code and working across large code bases with other people a breeze. And GothamGo is also great because it lets you auto-generate code by a computer, and it probably looks virtually indistinguishable from the code written by the human being next to you, or hopefully looks somewhat similar at least. And that said, there are a whole host of benefits using Go. I agree with pretty much all of them, so I'm not disagreeing with any of that, but I also just want to kind of remind us all to take a step back and remember that, before Go, we all used something else. And at some point, we made a conscious decision to switch to Go, whether you were starting up a new company or a new team or a new project, and you just decided to start with Go from the get-go. Sorry, no pun intended, actually. Or if you were migrating like a crufty old code base that was legacy code in a language that wasn't performant enough or some other consideration, you had to make that decision at some point. And it was...
Sorry, you're feeding back a little bit. You're crowding.
Sorry. Okay. And it wasn't just a question of, do I like Go? Is this something I want to try? But it was also a question of, am I willing to take this leap of faith and try something new? Something that to you or to someone else may be like currently unproven. And I know that sounds really weird because when you're like a small company, like a startup, you are already taking a risk. So it's not saying that people are risk averse necessarily, but it's another unknown, and that's the factor that you really need to consider more carefully. It's not just about, is Go standing on its own merits, but is it worth like this initial investment cost? I am a big believer in using the right tool for the job. Like I said, in many cases, I do personally think Go is often a really good tool for a job. Maybe not the best tool, but often good enough, way above average good. And I definitely care about making sure everyone else also has the right tools they need to be productive and also happy in their jobs. Ironically, about 2 hours ago, I was debugging the present tool, which I'm using here, so maybe I chose not the best tool for the job in this case. Fun fact, it was solved by go get-u naturally, so it's okay. Yeah. And as gophers, as people who have been using Go for probably weeks or months or years now, for many of us in this room, we've all grown to love Go. We love it for its performance, for its ease of use, for its readability. We love the standard libraries and the community and any other reason that anyone here wants to throw out. But I think once you become familiar with something, you start to want to use it everywhere. And when Go is your hammer, you start thinking everything is possible. You want to use Go everywhere. I think the quote I have up here is, when Go is your hammer, everything starts to look like a nail, because you just want to use it everywhere. But it's also important to take a step back and realize that sometimes a hammer is not always the tool you need. I got this picture of Google Images and I didn't credit it, so oops. And when you're looking for a tool, there are a bunch of considerations. The three that I think about for languages are, does it, generally speaking, make sense? Like, many languages these days are general purpose, or not designed for just one or two things. But certainly if you're trying to write, for example, something needs to really perform in a low-level infrastructure tool, you probably maybe don't want to use Ruby or Haskell. I'm not hating on these particular languages, it's just that performance isn't necessarily known for being their strong suits. You want to find something that unifies your team. It doesn't have to be the most popular thing that everyone loves, but it should be a tool that allows your team, whether it's one person, a handful of people, or even hundreds or thousands of developers, to collaborate, where everyone is willing to eventually buy in and accept that maybe a little bit of a trade-off in personal happiness is okay if it allows everyone else to be more productive as a whole. And it should also just accelerate progress. The language shouldn't hold you back from doing things. You shouldn't be wasting time trying to get your language to compile because of syntax errors or things that just really hinder productivity and that block you from shipping and really delivering experience to your users. A language, at the end of the day, is just a tool, and its primary goal is to unite your engineering team. And if it's polarizing your team, if you find yourself getting to all of these debates in the middle of the workday about, oh, this language is great because it has this type of syntactic sugar, or it doesn't, then honestly, I think it's failed, because even though those debates are great as kind of intellectual discourse or as a side interest, or as an interest, but if they're distracting you from actually getting work done and for delivering to your users, I think that's a net loss. So as engineers, as people who are building products and tools that are being used out in the wild by users beyond ourselves, it's really important to keep the big picture in mind. Developer happiness is super important. We want to love our jobs. We want to love the tools we're using in our jobs. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we are building things for other people. Even if you work on something like the Go language itself or some language or debugging tool, you are building for other people, whether it's other engineers or for users in the public. And it's really really important to remember who your users ultimately are and why you're building something, whether it's to build a language that allows people to be more productive or whether you're using a language to build things to make people's lives easier or to reduce risk or to make a user experience in a traditionally hard industry like finance easier. So at the end of the day, we want to focus on the end user, and a language is as valuable to the extent that it lets you ship and build and do that. Another factor that I think is really important is short versus long-term thinking. So kind of the time horizon you're building against. If you're hacking together a prototype because you're presenting to, I don't know, like your venture capital investors or something in a week, versus if you're trying to build out an existing business for many more months or years, your considerations are obviously very different. If you're trying to build like a web app and you're willing to get this out within a couple of weeks, then maybe using something like Ruby on Rails that has a lot of auto magic but lets you kind of get started really quickly makes a lot of sense. Whereas if you're trying to build a giant code base that you expect will scale and grow with your team as you hire hundreds and thousands more people, maybe something like Go makes more sense because it's more optimized for working across larger teams. And I think Russ's talk this morning did a great job on touching how the team is trying to improve that even more. I think this comes down to the balance between optimizing for the initial time to market, like how quickly can you develop and iterate on something, versus long-term maintainability and stability. And I think the latter is where Go really shines. But certainly, I do think developing Go is pretty quick now, but that's as someone who's gotten used to it. I think if you are starting out with Go for the first time, but you have a very tight deadline, that may not be true. So it's really important to know what your own constraints are, what your priorities are, and to optimize for the variable that's right for you, not what Hacker News is telling you to use. Today, we see Go really shine in areas like building distributed systems, in server-side development, a lot of command line tools for various purposes, and I think that's also really loved widely by SRE and operations teams for scripting and automation and more kind of routine maintenance tasks or one-off tasks. It's really quick to be productive in Go. The type tracking makes a lot of these tasks a lot safer and easier to perform, and you kind of lose that risk of runtime errors that you might see in a language like Python that has traditionally been more favored in, for example, scripting. Here's the list of just a few reasons why people say they love Go. If you look at blog posts, if you go to meetups or people talk about moving to Go, you've probably heard most of these thrown around many times. You have static binaries. You get to, even from one machine, you can compile to basically any other architecture. Tools like GoFont make writing Go a lot more pleasant and make working with other people's code a lot more manageable because you're not, you don't have this initial curve of learning someone else's code style or preference. It's a lot more performant than higher level languages, but it has that same easy to use syntax, and it's a lot more memory efficient, and so many more reasons. I think if you talk to different people, they'll all give you their own reasons, but these are some themes I've seen thrown around most frequently. Why do these matter? Static binaries let you simplify your deployments, especially if you're using them with Docker or other container technology. It's really easy to just get one small container, for example, using even an Alpine-based image, which is 5 megabytes, and just put a single executable, a single binary inside that and just run that. So it also makes system-level dependency management easier. Cross-compilation lets you support more users. Certain tools, you can go to release page and you can download basically a compiled binary for basically any platform, and that lets you give consistent experiences to people on different computers. Tools like GoFund let you focus on building and shipping rather than getting into debates over style. And tools like Gotlin, they're just there, reminding you to write good documentation, telling you that your exported method doesn't have the right comment or something. Front end is one area where I think Go is traditionally less used. It's really, using tools like Gopher.js is great because you get to share business logic and avoid rewriting that in like Go and JavaScript and potentially other languages. The static typing allows you to, like have more safety checks than JavaScript itself would allow. But that said, tools like TypeScript, which also compile in JavaScript, offer a more concise alternative to Go. And in this example, taken from the Gopher.js web page, the resulting file from a Gopher.js, even like a hello world example, is like 60-something kilobytes, which is compared to like 60 bytes for just like the JavaScript version. The larger file means that your resulting file is harder to read because it injects entire Gopher.js runtime into that JavaScript file. And it also means that you're prone to network latency. It's going to take a page a lot longer to load, up to like tens of milliseconds, potentially like seconds on really slow networks. And performance may also vary within Gopher.js itself. Within data science, Python and I believe R are the leading standards in the industry. Python is popular according to a friend I know who works in data science or data analysis because of libraries like pandas and NumPy and SciPy. The Python community has spent like many years growing its ecosystem around data science. And even though efforts like Gopher Notes by I think Daniel Whitenack have really led Go to really grow in this area, it still hasn't become, we still have a lot more area to grow. This is true for other areas as well, like building mobile apps, machine learning, writing like DSLs, and so forth. And over time, Go will grow in maturity documentation, just kind of leading by example, a virtuous cycle where a few projects will use Go and then set the example and path forward, and just community and user adoption. So to conclude, based on your project, your constraints, find the right tool for you. It may be Go, I hope it is, but if it isn't, you shouldn't feel bad just because everyone around you is telling you to use Go. I know it's weird to say that at a Go conference, but do what makes you happy and profit. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Peggy. That was awesome.